Our love is geothermal. I break a sweat getting next to you, baby. Oh yeah.
Talk to us about the process of producing Heat Pump. How did you come about that project, the creative process, and then how did you happen upon Our Love is Geothermal as a next project?
Yeah, well, doing I'm Your Heat Pump really came out of my work as a volunteer with various aspects of climate. Specifically, in this case, I'm a volunteer with the Switches On, which promotes electrification in California and now Washington State. And I was just having a little conversation with the director of communications at the Switches On and sort of joking about how, yeah, it would be funny to write electrification music. And she said, no, you should actually try that. And so, yeah, just sitting around one day kind of spitballing ideas, I somehow landed on this phrase, I'm your heat pump. And it just sort of wrote itself from there, honestly. It was like, yeah, all the images that go along with heat and pumping, like it doesn't take a lot of imagination. You can see where that can go. So I had a lot of fun with it, and fortunately, when I was done with it, and I nervously approached Will, do you want to sing this? And I was very happy he said yes, because I had his voice in my head the whole time. And how that led to Our Love is Geothermal. Well, we were very lucky when I'm Your Heat Pump first came out. Actually, even before it was a video, we had a little article that came out in a local news site called Berkeley Side, and then our local NPR climate reporter got a hold of that, did a piece for KQED, our local NPR station. That got picked up by NPR, and it broadcast nationally. The day after it broadcast nationally, I got a very nice email from someone named Jamie Beard.
Okay.
Yeah. And
that's how it happened, huh?
It was very concise. As I recall, it was something like, "Hi, loved your heat pump video. Would love
I'm
to.
such a fan. Total fangirl.
Would love to discuss a follow-up with geothermal." And we had a conversation a few days later, and then we were off and running, and it all came together very quickly for Climate Week in New York City in September, this past September.
And where you performed live.
Yes.
That was amazing.
And we did I'm Your Heat Pump as ground source heat pump.
You added in ground source heat pump. So we got 2 geothermal songs in one. All right. So ask any creative if they can create a song on demand. So and I came to you and said, we need a song about geothermal. You didn't really have a whole lot of creative freedom there. How did you do that? Because I remember you saying, oh God, I'm going on vacation. Maybe it'll just happen while I'm on vacation, but you can't force these things.
Yeah.
So how do you work your way through that as a creative?
Yeah, well, I think my background probably helps me there, because for 15 or 20 years before we started doing these songs, I was doing commissions in the classical world for a lot of choirs and other ensembles, and before that I'd written some musical theater. So I'm sort of used to writing on demand about things that that aren't necessarily coming, from my soul. But I really enjoy the process of getting into something new that I don't know that much about. And I think I knew just enough about geothermal to know, and of course got a lot of great input from you about how do we want to message this? What are the themes we want to hit?
Terminology.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was able to go on vacation with these things in my head, and it was nice. I was just sitting on a beach, staring at the ocean and letting these things marinate. And yeah, I got an idea by the time I came home from that turned into the song. And then it was a lot of sweat from there, making it all work. And we had a lot of really interesting, back and forth over email with the lyrics and getting everything just right. It was really fun.
I'll go on the record to say that back and forth was, the song was racier than it was racier than it ended up being. It was more on the heat pump racy spectrum. But let's turn to that for a second. How do you thread that needle? So as a songwriter and also as a singer and a performer, how do you thread the needle on the make people blush part, but not too much to where you get banned and they won't play your song on NPR? Y'all did that pretty well, but for Heat Pump, you were just on the edge of, right? You teetering on the edge. How do you thread that needle and have people giving you feedback like, oh my God, I thought that was whatever, fill in the blank, amazing or raunchy or whatever. Like what have you heard?
Well, like what Mike was saying before, we had been already doing songs in the R&B genre. So of course that R&B has a lot of innuendos and a lot of like, groove with me and do this with me and so we sort of like were talking about that is like, is this okay? Are these appropriate words, things to say? But I also feel like, music is music, and so people sort of get the innuendo and sort of laugh. However, there are people who blush and also go, ooh, I don't know if that's going to be something that we can do with my, the bottom line or the people that we're dealing with. Like for example.
So you had corporate sponsors or corporate participants in Heat Pump, right?
Yeah.
And they were cool with the song, or were they blushing?
Pretty much. I mean, I think Heat Pump was fine.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because I think at first it was fine.
Yeah.
We never had any direct contact with Mitsubishi, so the switch is on.
That's a heat pump manufacturer.
Yes. I actually own a Mitsubishi heat pump, so I thought it was great that they were sponsoring it. But the switch is on kind of approached them for the funding, and we were really dealing with the switches on. So it was all hearsay, but I think at first they were like, yeah, this is great, we love this, it's edgy. And then somewhere along the line after it came out, from what we hear, it sort of worked its way up the chain, and someone farther up the chain was like, ooh, this makes us a little nervous, so maybe, I think someone had big plans like, oh, we're gonna do all this stuff with this song, and it ended up not exactly happening that way.
But it was on national NPR, so that
exactly. It's gotten a lot of great attention, so we can't complain, and we're now playing it live too, as much as we can. So.
Yeah, and when it comes to public education and using this sort of and for the audience, for those of you that were here this morning and heard Ishan's presentation in 101. He mentioned somewhere in there the need for creatives and musicians and artists and lawyers and philanthropists and this whole list of people that geothermal needs. Geothermal has not had a very clear and engaging narrative. There's not been a lot of catchy, exciting, and interesting things to really grab onto if you're a layperson. What do you think about this communication strategy for both Heat Pump or Our Love is Geothermal when it comes to just the random person that heard you on NPR? Do you see or do you think it's an effective strategy? And have people reached out to you, just lay people reached out to you about the song?
Yeah, I think it's so important because I think heat pumps and geothermal energy have something in common, which is that a lot of lay people have no idea what it is in the first place. I mean, they haven't even gotten to how do I feel about it. They don't know what it is. I mean, when I was telling people that I was working on a song about geothermal energy, I mean, even people I know well who are well-educated people, they're like, oh, you mean like volcanoes? Well, yeah, but we're talking about the geothermal industry, generating electricity. I mean, it really was a new concept. Yeah. And I knew something about it because I'm into climate and I'm into clean energy and stuff like that. So I think that's where this is important. We feel like we're communicating really basic information to people about what is this, and where I think music and kind of storytelling and the arts in general can be very powerful is just providing this first point of contact where, that's our hope, is that people who maybe don't know anything about it, they're going to see the video and now they know something about it, and hopefully their first contact was a positive experience. They had fun with it, right? It wasn't hearing it in the context of politics or the economy or anything that kind of polarizes people. It gets right to the inside. I think that's what the arts do, what storytelling does. It gets past people's defenses And so if we can engage them on that positive level, maybe they're going to be ready to think about it on those other levels, the political, the economic, and so forth.
Yeah.
I was saying yesterday we did a podcast for Climate One that, there are the climate scientists, there are the journalists, and then there's us. We're on the spectrum of climate entertainers. So we're soft serve, right? So the public doesn't want to hear about all this complicated stuff. They want something that's easier to, get it down. What do they say? A spoonful of sugar. And so we're the spoonful of sugar. We entertain you like, oh, that's so cool. And so like part of that is like getting them just thinking about it. And then the deep dive happens later. So,
I mean, just the term though, climate entertainer, that's a new thing. Y'all are blazing a trail a little bit there, right? But
you penned the word. You penned climate rock.
Yeah, climate rock or eco rock or. You have created a genre, and you should keep going there. So let's talk about that for a second. So in terms of what's next, you've done a heat pump song that turned into a ground source heat pump song. Thank you very much. You did a Our Love is Geothermal song. What do you think happens now for creating and really leaning into your climate education genre? What are you thinking?
Yeah, endless possibilities, right? In this space when it comes to climate and environment and clean energy, there's so many things to get excited about, and so much need for communication and education in a way that's not like in your face, and it's not too wonky and so forth. So yeah, so we formed a little organization, the two of us, to kind of keep this thing going. We call it Eco Soul Entertainment. So that's our label for it, Eco Soul, and we have a few projects in the works right now. Do you want to talk about what we're doing right now?
Yeah, so we just finished a song about pollination and flowers called "I Like Flowers." It was a really battle between "I love flowers," "I like flowers." So he wrote "I like," so we kept it with that.
Yeah.
It's a very funky song. Yeah. So we're working with a few Bay Area botanical companies and organizations, and so right now we're doing a crowdfunding project where we're working with youth and young adults, so like high school, college youth, to film our video. So we're kind of doing a summer internship, and so I think it's really fun because now we're I was a former teacher, he works in schools as well, so we're sort of using those skill sets to also put together like some really fun videos. And so that's one of the projects, but we're also you're working on a new song too, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of at the end of the writing process for a song about induction cooktops. So staying with the electrification theme, I'm thinking maybe like a suite, like 4 slow jams about electrification. Because, there's 4 main appliances in your home that run on gas that we want to replace, right? There's the heat pump for your HVAC, there's the heat pump water heater, there's the induction cooktop, and there's the electric dryer. So we got the heat pump, and I think induction is a good place to go next. So another slow jam, a little bit different, a little more up-tempo, and this one's going to be a duet, actually. So you may have noticed in the Geothermal song, we have this really amazing backing vocalist named Sarah Williams, who's providing all the female backing vocals, and I'm hoping to entice her to sing our induction song with us. So yeah, she and Will can have some fun together, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, I was honored to be on set. So this heat pump and Our Love is Geothermal were shot in LA, right? So we produced them in a movie studio in LA. Really high tech, really cool. But being behind the scenes in a production like that, there were an insane number of people involved in set building and costumes and choreography. I mean, all in all, there were like 100 people running around doing stuff for the video. That's a hell of a lot of work, right? I mean,
oh my gosh, yeah.
So if y'all are going to create a genre, this becomes like your full-time job. You're just going to have to start doing this. I mean, it's a lot of, right?
Yeah, well, we were super spoiled with these first 2 videos because, we had some financial backing. Thank you very much, Jamie. And so we were able to work with these amazing crews and, an amazing, two amazing directors who did both of the videos and had basically the same crew. And so it was really easy for us. We didn't have to do very much. We sat in on the pre-production meetings. We saw the treatments, the storyboards. We gave our feedback. But from there, we were basically the talent. And the second one especially, we got to do some dancing, which was terrifying.
Amazing.
You say amazing, I say terrifying. Yeah, maybe a little bit of both. It was definitely a lot of fun. Yeah, we worked with a choreographer. But now, this new project we have, when you're working in the native plant field, there's not a lot of funding there for music videos. So
if in the crowd there's anyone who has money and is really excited about fighting invasive plant species and would like to support a video about that, you know who to contact.
Well, and also, if you have something that you're really passionate about in the climate sustainability genre, and you say, that would be great as a music video, definitely call us. I just had a text, I told you about the
agroecology.
Agroecology. They said, do you ever thought about doing a song about that? And I was like, no. Do you have a budget?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. There's, I feel like I run into at least one person a week that wants to do something like what you are doing. These are people that are not engineers and they're not scientists and they're not bankers. They do other things in life, right? Many of them are creatives or writers or artists of different types. Other media than music. What advice would you? And I of course say, well, just do it, just start, just go, right? But that's not super good advice, right? That's pretty vague. What would you say to folks here or elsewhere, because this is actually recorded and available online, so it will have quite a broad audience of a lot of different types of people. What would you say to folks who want to contribute to, climate progress or geothermal specifically, but they're creatives and they're not really sure how to apply their expertise? It's not always clear what you can do, right? How did you all decide, look, I've got this skill set and I've got this passion and I'm going to do this? And what advice would you give to people that want to do the same thing?
Yeah, well, it took me several years of already being in the climate world and volunteering in it for it to even occur to me to bring music into it, even though, I've been a professional musician for
You did your diagram. Right, you did your
the climate Venn diagram.
Yeah,
which I can't take credit for. Yeah, some of you might know this. It's Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson made the climate Venn diagram, which is the overlapping circles are what needs to be done, what do you love doing, and what are you good at. And that's going to be different for everyone, right? But I think it's really important to feel like whatever it is you do, there's a way you can bring it into this, and I really believe that, because this is such a vast field, right? And there's so many ways that we're coming at this problem and on so many different levels. So there's really room for everyone's talents. And from there, I think as artists, we're always thinking about what's the need? What need are we filling with our music? Because that's going to determine whether it catches on or not. Is this filling a need for people?
And I think the same applies to as lifelong learners, we always constantly are figuring out what's the deliverable, what's the thing that we want to have happen once we have the cause, what's the action. So we sort of talked about that yesterday about we created this Eco Soul Fest earlier this month, and we had people from all different walks of life, from people doing induction stoves to electrification to doing food deserts, food security. Yeah. And so we said, let's do a project where people have something to do after the fact. Instead of talking on stage, let's go out and do something. So I think that's part of the issue too, is people feel like they don't have anything to do once the conversation's over. So if you give them an action item and say, okay, now you go out and do X, Y, Z, I think that's really an important thing to think about.
Yeah, find different levels of engagement like that. That's
learning.
really key. Yeah, and the arts are great for that. for engaging people, and every artist, or even non-arts, right? You've got different ways of engaging different people on different levels.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of conversation in the world right now about the anxiety, the levels of anxiety that children feel in particular, but also adults. But specifically mental health issues with children worried about the future of the world and climate.
Yeah.
And this does seem like an interesting creative outlet for, here's something to do, make a song or paint a picture or whatever it is, right?
Actually, just yesterday was Earth Day officially, right? And I lead an eco group at my kids' school, and we call it Eco Elders because we're parents and teachers, the old people working on green stuff. And yesterday we launched our seed library for the school. It's like this big box where you can donate seeds and you can take seeds, and it's very fun. But what was so cool was our garden teacher brought it into a couple of classrooms, and she had the kids decorate the box. So it's really beautiful now, and they did a great job with it. And I feel like that gives them ownership of this now. They made this thing, and they feel connected to it. And now they feel connected to the process, and they come over and they've got packets they can touch, and they can actually bring it home and make something grow. And that's something that makes you feel connected to the planet. It gives you hope, and it's just beauty, right? We need beauty in our lives, and I think for me that's an antidote to anxiety and despair, whatever you might be feeling in this moment.
And along with that, we need science and we need truth, right? So part of it is we're in a battle versus, misinformation about, pushing away science. So the fact that we have science, we have truth, gives us more hope for our children to keep, thinking and processing about those things.
Yeah, you mix in a little humor while you're at it, and a little creativity, and you've got a good recipe, right?
Humor is powerful.
I mean, it's true when you say taking ownership. I remember when we were on set for our Love is Geothermal, there were 100 people on set who had never heard anything about geothermal. And by the time we were done, at the end of the day, every single person in the studio was singing.
Wow.
It was singing the song and was like, "I love geothermal." And it was like, it's exactly what you said. It's engagement in a process, and then owning a piece of that process. So
yeah, dropping little pebbles in the pond, and hopefully those ripples spread. Yeah. And that's a big reason why we've put a bunch of effort into getting a live band together, so we can take these songs out there.
Take it on tour?
Yeah, exactly. Just play them for as many people as possible. And we're talking about how can we incorporate maybe a little bit of theater into it to really call some more attention to this. So it's not just here's a song and it happens to be about geothermal. But we have your attention, we have your engagement. What more can we tell you? Can we move you to the next level and get you excited about this? So
Geothermal the musical?
Love it. That's we'll debut that next year.
Good idea, Will.
At San Francisco Climate Week. Well, thank you for, you all are blazing a trail. I think others will follow. And thank you for bringing creative energy to science and to geothermal. And if anybody would like to contribute to ideas for next projects, please grab these guys because they're amazing.
And you can go to
Mike and Will.
ecosoulentertainment.com.
There you go. All right, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Geothermal, I break a sweat.